The Paddy Power Half Hour on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.
You're very welcome along to this Friday's edition of the Paddy Power Half Hour. You've probably noticed that myself, Will O'Callaghan, Enda, Coll and Phil Egan look like we're probably better dressed to go towards a wedding or perhaps even a Football Manager European final with the way we're dressed at the moment. But lads, we're doing this for a very good cause, Enda.
Yeah, formal Friday, Will. It's for all the frontline workers out there. But this is how I normally dress. Do you not remember?
We can Photoshop you back into previous editions. Phil Egan, if you were a manager on a sideline, would you be a tracksuit manager? Would you be a formal wear kind of guy?
Nah, definitely tracksuit. I've worn a tracksuit. This is the first time we've been out of a tracksuit for about the last month. And I've gone three-piece suit. All I'm missing now is a snooker cue. But no, I'd go tracksuit. You look at the tracksuit managers around now. Klopp is pure tracksuit. He has worn suits before, but I think back to the 90s, Roy Evans, Kevin Keegan. Sometimes Mourinho would go suit, but then when he's trying to send out a message of how things are going from bad to worse, he'll rock up in a tracksuit. Conte did the same actually with Chelsea.
He did, yeah. He used to vary it up a bit. And if you're Pep Guardiola, you go kind of half and half. You go slightly formal, not quite the suit, but go stylish.
He likes to dress well younger than he actually is. Like he's probably the best dressed manager in the Premier League this year. Although that scarf and the cardigan last year, the cardigan was something that it drove everyone mad. Which shows you, like, people actually do pay attention to these things. There's a good story that Roy Keane told on our roadshow a few months ago that when Alex Ferguson came in, he put a big emphasis on people wearing suits to the game, people dressing correctly. And Eric Cantona would never wear a suit. He would always just turn up in like a tracksuit. And Alex Ferguson would just be like, leave him off. He's French. He's grand. But that was just like special treatment for Eric Cantona, for a special player. For me, I would be Mourinho at United at the start. Do you remember he rocked up in a nice blazer, nice bright white top. Things were going well. He was looking sharp. He had the hair nicely cut. And then within 3 months, he was back to the tracksuit, looking gruff. He hadn't shaved. That would likely be me. Although, something you never really see, and it's something I would probably do because, like Phil was saying, he's been in a tracksuit for the last couple of weeks. I've been wearing shorts non-stop in this weather. I love wearing shorts. I would be one of the rare managers that would wear a pair of shorts on the sideline.
Oh, go full up. Owen Coyle. Remember Owen Coyle? Socks up.
Owen Coyle.
Shorts on.
Probably Mike Phelan would probably fall into that category as well, Enda.
Yeah. Sorry, my earphones fell out there. I couldn't actually hear what any of us were saying. But
I'm saying about Owen Coyle wearing the shorts and socks up to his knees, like pretty much ready to go if he's called upon.
Yeah, there's something about it that doesn't look quite right. It actually does just look like the manager is living in years past. So it doesn't look right, but I'd go for it.
Phil, who's the most stylish manager in the Premier League for you then?
Probably is Guardiola. I mean, that cardigan got a lot of stick, but actually, remember he sold it at the end of last season, raised quite a lot of money for charity, Guardiola, but it looked a bit knackered by the end of it. But the fact that people remember it, if you just say Pep Guardiola's cardigan, I'm surprised it doesn't actually have its own Twitter page. But I'd say Guardiola, especially at the start of the season, he rocks up with the summer look. You know, he's got the slim figure to go with it. If I was going to try and model myself on somebody's look, it'd be probably Pep Guardiola.
Right, okay. Well, the reason we are dressing up at the moment...
I know, yeah. Or lack of hair, even.
On this Friday, the reason that we are dressed up is because we're asking everyone else to dress up to support frontline workers. You can check out the donate links on GoFundMe if you look out for Formal Friday. It's also on the offtheball.com website as well. We are raising funds to support the Matter Foundation, who are supporting frontline staff in the fight against COVID-19. Those at Beaumont Heroes Appeal as well. Together with our heroes, Temple Street and Crumlin Children's Hospital, the Mercy Hospital Foundation in Cork, University Limerick Hospital as well, St James's Hospital Foundation, the Cork University Hospital Charity and Feed the Heroes as well. So we're asking you to dress up on this Friday. Perhaps a strange feeling after the few weeks when you've probably been in your cash, and then to make a donation as well. You can check out all the details on offtheball.com. But we are here on the Paddy Power Half Hour with thanks to Paddy Power, who sponsor our football coverage here across Off the Ball. For information on responsible gambling, check out dunlewy.net. Not a whole lot happening on the field, but plenty for us to chat about, because Phil Egan, this is quite a bizarre week. A lot of kind of anniversaries coming around. And one that probably jumps to mind is that David Moyes, if he had seen out his full contract at Manchester United, his contract would be about to run down now at this stage. Remarkable that he only saw one season of the multi-year contract deal.
Yeah, just a couple of days ago, the 22nd of April, that was the anniversary when he got sacked. He was only there for 10 months. And, you know, I think back to, I can remember the day it happened. It was pretty much on the cards that it was going to happen. We got the confirmation early in the morning, but he kind of was holding on towards the end because they were still in the Champions League. They turned it around against Olympiacos after losing the first leg 2-0. They obviously won the second leg at Old Trafford. Then, you know, the tie was still there for the taking against Bayern Munich. They drew the first leg 1-1 at Old Trafford. But once they got knocked out of the Champions League, and then they had that heavy defeat to Manchester City in the derby at Old Trafford, the writing was on the wall. And just looking back on his record that season, they obviously lost home and away to Liverpool, to Manchester City. They lost at home to the likes of West Brom, Newcastle, Everton, Spurs. It was the Everton game that did the damage. The game at Goodison Park, they lost. And you remember there was somebody dressed up as the Grim Reaper that day, and he didn't last much longer. But such a hard act to follow. Whoever was going to follow Alex Ferguson. And as things have panned out since Moyes was sacked, managers haven't done that much better. There has been a little bit of silverware, but not the major honours that Manchester United demand, the likes of the Premier League and the Champions League. There's been FA Cups, League Cups, Europa Leagues, but no manager that's been able to get close to winning a Premier League title. Jose Mourinho finished second, but they were still way off Manchester City that season.
And I suppose it was a difficult appointment for United to make at the time, because there were two schools of thought. You either go for someone who's a big personality, maybe like getting Mourinho a few years earlier, or getting Pep Guardiola in when he was on a sabbatical in New York at the time, as opposed to going for someone like David Moyes, who had shown that he was a good operator in the Premier League, that he could do things on a limited budget, and that maybe he was ready and able to get a chance to move to the big time.
Yeah, well, when you look back on it now with hindsight, it was such a bizarre situation that Alex Ferguson was almost let choose his successor. He was the main man in charge of even approaching these managers that he wanted to replace him. I know Alex Ferguson had quite a bit of a reign at the club for so long, but I mean, when you're thinking about a future of a club the size of Manchester United, it was a crazy situation that they let the current manager choose his successor. He did try to get Jose Mourinho before he went back to Chelsea for the second time. He also, like you said, he met with Pep Guardiola. He details that meeting in his book. He met him in New York. Guardiola had already been offered the Bayern Munich job, so it was just a matter of choosing whether he wanted the United job or whether he wanted the Munich job. He obviously chose Munich. And apparently he also met with Klopp as well after Guardiola had turned him down. So there was quite a long list ahead of David Moyes, although at the time United tried to make out that David Moyes was Sir Alex Ferguson's first choice, the chosen one, as the United fans even called him when he first arrived at the club. So firstly, he was never really the first choice, so that was a bad start for United, and it really went from bad to worse. But I suppose one thing that you have to take into account is there's so many different things going on at the club that David Moyes didn't really get credit for. I mean, at the start of the season, they also got a new chief executive, Ed Woodward, now in charge, who United fans are now blaming for the entire situation. So had they not got rid of chief executive and replaced him with Ed Woodward, then David Moyes' reign might have been a little bit different. Maybe they would have been able to get a few transfers over the line a bit better than they did. And also, he came in and he changed the club dramatically in terms of the coaching staff, which didn't really go down well. If you look back at any, like Rio Ferdinand accounts it very well, that the players were not happy with the fact that he got rid of the coaching staff.
It was interesting, Phil, as well, that Moyes never really got to realise his transfer ambitions as well. You know, they kind of dithered around getting Fellaini in and ended up paying over what his release clause would have been because they waited for so long into that summer. They eventually got Juan Mata as really Moyes' major signing the January of that season. But since he's left that, there's been admissions from Cesc Fabregas that he held talks with David Moyes about potentially signing when he was getting ready to leave Barcelona. Toni Kroos, when he was deciding on his future at Bayern Munich, also spoke with Moyes about potentially going there as well. it's very clear he'd identified the area of the field where problems were, but they weren't able to get those signings over the line.
No, and Cesc Fabregas obviously would have made a big difference as well. And I think that's been the problem for United since Alex Ferguson left, that it's a case of ifs and buts. That Enda just listed some of the managers they've been linked with who are all world-class managers. That you look at what Klopp has done at Liverpool, you can only imagine what he would have done if he had replaced Alex Ferguson. Now, whether he was going to step in after Ferguson, I always thought whoever got that next job after Alex Ferguson, it was almost a poison chalice because such a hard act to follow. But you look at obviously what Guardiola has done, since Alex Ferguson has left Manchester United, and you just see that the players were mentioned, the likes of Toni Kroos, Cesc Fabregas, Gareth Bale was another one that David Moyes mentioned as well, that they didn't get these players, they didn't get these managers, and that's why they don't challenge for the major honours just yet. And he ends up getting Fellaini, which pretty much epitomised his reign there. He gets Mata in January, but Fellaini was just a divisive character for United fans, where he was effective, and Van Gaal picked him, Mourinho picked him, but here were United fans used to looking at the way the team played under Alex Ferguson, this free-flowing, counter-attacking football at times, just all-out attack. Rarely did they resort to just lumping it up to the big man, which, as I said, is effective, but it just didn't really endear Moyes or the managers after to United fans when they were bringing on Fellaini.
Yeah, and I think that's a key point as well. Will, sorry to interrupt, is that David Moyes never really had, throughout his Everton career, he never really had a style of play or a tactic, or like Pep Guardiola he evolved the game in terms of passing the ball. Klopp evolved the game in terms of the high press and putting your opponents under pressure up the field and regaining possession. And David Moyes never had that. So when you look at his career at United, and you look at the likes of Pep Guardiola in his first year at Man City, and Klopp in his first couple of years at Liverpool as well, the reason that you were able to allow them so much time is because you knew that evolution took a year to get the players in that were able to play that game plan effectively. And David Moyes never had a distinct game plan. So therefore, after 10 months of seeing very poor football on the pitch, no distinct game plan on the pitch, and no sign of where the club is going to go in terms of the style of play, that's probably why he wasn't given as much time as, say, the likes of Pep or Guardiola were given, or Pep or Klopp were given in their first couple of years at the clubs in Man City and Liverpool as well. So he definitely failed on the pitch, as well as you will give him some credit for some of the things that went off the pitch that were out of his control. But on the pitch, that United side were just not good enough.
I kind of wonder as well, Phil, if Gill had stayed on as effectively their vice executive and had been our chief executive, I should say. They changed the role slightly when Ed Woodward came in, but if he'd still been there, I wonder if there would have been more of a consistency with what United did, because what seems strange when you look back now in hindsight at their appointments, they appointed very different managers as they went along. David Moyes had a way of playing football, Louis van Gaal played a totally different style, to Mourinho a different style, and to now to Solskjaer trying to bring back something closer to what Ferguson would have played when he was having his playing days there. Over the period since David Moyes left, in these last kind of 7 years or so, United have gone in vastly different directions with the four managers since.
Yeah, and even now, you mentioned Solskjaer. Do we really know what exactly they're trying to do? Obviously, they have brought in Bruno Fernandes, and he's made a big impact before the season was suspended. They've got pacey players. So we've seen in big games where Solskjaer can set United up and they can hit teams on the break, and they have that blistering pace of the likes of Rashford and Daniel James, and obviously Martial as well. And is that the risk they're going down? But where they've struggled is they can't break teams down. They can't dictate play. And players that we mentioned that in their peak, the likes of Kroos or Fabregas, would have been absolutely key for what they were trying to do.
Phil's dog doesn't like Fabregas.
Yeah,
in the background.
No, absolutely not. No, and that or somebody's delivering a package. That's the neighbourhood watch scheme we've got going on here.
Late deliveries at the moment in the Egan household. End of Coll, when we Look at what's happened with Moyes since. I think it's actually been quite sad. David Moyes, who built up such a wonderful reputation at Everton, and the good work he did with that club for so long, his career has never really got back going since. He took the risk about going to Real Sociedad, didn't pay off, didn't have a good time in Spain, relegated with Sunderland, and has had 2 spells now with West Ham. Should get credit though for keeping him up in his first reign, and who knows, maybe he'll keep him up in the second reign as well. But David Moyes' stock fell pretty quickly after he left United.
Yeah, and when I was looking into this, the main thing that hit me was just how young David Moyes looked when he took the United job. And that seems to be a thing that runs through the United managers these days. It's almost like the American presidency, that the United manager just seems to age about 10 years after 2 years of taking the club. So David Moyes definitely fell into that. He's sort of from a bygone era in a way. Those kind of managers like David Moyes don't exist anymore. The managers that stay at a club for over 10 years. And it's almost as if he thought that he had done the safe job. He had done the thing with Everton where he lasted tons of years, and he took a lot of risks. He took the United job when he may not have been to the standard needed. He took the Real Sociedad job when he had never had any experience abroad. He took a Sunderland job that was always going to end in disaster. And he took 2 West Ham jobs in terms of relegation fights. So he has to be given credit for the risks he's taken with his career. People don't rate him as a manager as much as they used to, but he obviously has something about him that he can get players to. He can definitely organise a team to be hard to beat, but that's probably not enough anymore in today's modern football.
Phil Egan, it's also an anniversary around Arsene Wenger and leaving Arsenal as well.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to one man having so much control over a club that when they leave, it's hard to replicate it. But the difference with the Ferguson and Wenger eras is, as good as Wenger was, things had started to slip. Ferguson obviously had a few heavy defeats, but heavy defeats became a familiarity. And obviously, they lost 8-2 to United at Old Trafford under Wenger. They had a few heavy defeats at Anfield against Liverpool. Chelsea put 6 past them. This is something that happened, and we could see what was wrong with Wenger's team. They just didn't have a good enough defence. So they obviously, when he left, it was kind of, there was such a call for a section of Arsenal fans to get rid of him. And you were in that rock and a hard place where you could acknowledge that he was an absolute legend of the club, but that it was probably time for him to go if they were going to move forward. Now, since he's left, they brought in Unai Emery, and there were glimpses that maybe he could do the job, but he's since gone. Arteta has come in, and actually just touching on something Enda said about David Moyes, you weren't really clear what kind of style of play Moyes was going to try and adapt with United. It was quite clear from day one when Arteta came into Arsenal what he was going to try and do. Now, didn't quite have the players to do it all the time. They obviously try to play a high press game. Sometimes they seem to just run out of gas in the second half, or they weren't strong enough defensively. But at least with Arteta what his idea is now going forward. They've had a few results where you think, yeah, we can work with this guy. But yeah, Wenger, again, I remember it was a Friday morning, and it was just nearly 10 o'clock where all of a sudden it was announced that was it. He was going, and it put an end to all the questions that he was getting at press conferences. When are you going to call it a day?
The thing is, though, Enda, obviously it was Arsenal who kind of made the decision in this case as opposed to Wenger. Ferguson got to go out on his own terms. He decided, now I'm going to retire and I'm going to leave. I get the feeling that Wenger would have probably loved to have stayed on if Arsenal had kept him in charge.
Yeah, it didn't actually look like Arsene Wenger was really fazed by the vitriol, and it was vitriol at the end of his career at Arsenal. It was horrible to watch a legend of the club be hated at the club that he brought so much success to. So it was a sad end to his reign. What's interesting about the different approaches is that Arsenal obviously took the approach to end Wenger's career early. They also chose to be the ones to replace him. So, like I said, Alex Ferguson chose his own replacement. Arsenal got the decision to come up with their own manager. So they had a 3-man executive team of Sven Mislintat, and Ivan Gazidis. They were the two leads, essentially. Both of them have now left the club. 25 players registered under Wenger in his last game. 9 of them are currently at the club. So Arsenal, under the last 2 years, I couldn't believe it when I look back that this has only been 2 years since Arsene Wenger left the club. They have gone through an unbelievable amount of change in that time in terms of coaching staff. You have Freddie Adu is now the technical director. Freddie Ljungberg is he went from a reserve team coach to the assistant coach to the first team manager, and now back to the assistant coach. So they have gone through an unbelievable amount of change in terms of on the pitch, off the pitch, in the board, everything. That club has changed dramatically. And now I think Arteta is finally going to be the man who sort of calms it down a little bit. Unai Emery couldn't do it. And that's probably the point I made on this show. I think it was the day that Unai Emery was sacked that I know Arsenal didn't live up to anything under Unai Emery. They didn't really have a distinct type of play. They couldn't really defend. But if you look at the change that club has gone under over the last 2 years under Unai Emery, I don't know if there's too many managers out there that would have been able to deal with that either.
Phil, assess that for us then. In the 2 seasons that have gone by since, I remember Arsenal Fan TV and even some reasonable Arsenal fans this week 2 years ago were saying when the decision was made about Wenger, at least it's changed, at least it's going to be something different. New manager will come in, they'll bring in their own players, play their own way. But Arsenal seem to be in virtually the same position now as they were when they decided to part way with Wenger, just outside the Champions League spots, not quite making it in there.
Yeah, and it was always going to take time. I think Emery, there was a few games where you think, yeah, this looked like it could work. I think back to a North London derby when they beat Spurs at the Emirates, and just the energy they played with. That's what I remember even going into the game, everyone just expected Spurs to go to the Emirates and get the win, and Arsenal were brilliant that day. They had a game where they scored that great team goal, Aaron Ramsey away to Fulham, and you could hear the Arsenal fans were singing the name of Unai Emery, and they thought, yeah, this is going to work. Obviously, then it all fell fairly flat. You know, it didn't really work at the start of this season. He had issues with Mesut Ozil, didn't want to play him. Whether you think, whatever you think about Mesut Ozil's work rate, you know, he's still one of the most talented players in the Arsenal squad, so you try and fit him in. But what has kind of done a bit of good for Arteta was the Freddie Ljungberg caretaker role worked out so bad that when Arteta came in, the damage had already been done. There was nothing he could do. It was basically, yeah, finish out the season and we'll see what you can do. So there's very little pressure on him. But there has been signs that if Arteta can get a few players in, he knows exactly what he wants to do, and they could start getting closer to those top 4 places. But the competition is so high that there's only 4 places. So, you know, there is going to be good teams that miss out on it. Leicester have thrown a spanner in the works this season because they broke into it. Not many people thought they would break in. They thought, yeah, they've definitely got a chance at top 6 because we saw at the end of last season how they'd improved since Rodgers had come in. But because they go in, then one of the big guns is missing out. So, you know, it's not easy. Like, Liverpool are streets ahead of everyone at the moment. Manchester City are then streets ahead of the rest that are chasing. So you've basically got 2 places and you've got 5 or 6 teams trying to get them.
And in terms of our roundup of what's happening in the news at the moment, we've kind of been talking about COVID-19 and the potential returns of seasons over the last few weeks. We've had a few bits of news during the week in terms of, you know, potentially leagues coming back and European competitions as well. It seems the Bundesliga is kind of all systems go for end of May, early June. Teams are going to resume training from next week. But I suppose the important thing when we look at the Bundesliga is probably that Germany has maybe been less affected by COVID-19 than some of the rest of Europe.
Yeah, Germany, again, like the Germans do, they were just so obedient when it came to getting things done. The government acted quickly, and as a result, they've had a very few amount of deaths for their population, essentially, especially since they're right in the middle of Europe, very close to Italy. It could have spread very easily in Germany. So they've done a brilliant job over there. And that's probably one of the reasons why they will finally get the Bundesliga back up and going again. Will that spur on other leagues to do so? I don't think they'll be able to. Like if people think that because the Bundesliga come back, that the La Liga will automatically be able to follow suit. Spain was ravaged by the COVID-19 virus, so I would say though the public in Spain might be a little bit hesitant in bringing football back, and it definitely doesn't mean the Premier League is going to come back, because England are still right in the middle of this thing.
Well, Phil, it's interesting in terms of Spain, because the Liga have now booked medical teams to go and test every player in Spain before them potentially returning to training. Again, they're looking to try and get the league going in late May, which to me seems quite incredible, because as Enda has said, you know, thousands of deaths in Spain, COVID-19, lots of cases, particularly in population centres, and it spread very quickly then to the south of the country when people started to move out of the cities as well. It seems to me a very dangerous idea by La Liga to try and get the league back going as quickly as they are.
Yeah, well, I would imagine that they can only get it going if it's safe to do so. That's what the Premier League have said all along. They will only resume football when it is safe to do so. So if they're going to carry out tests and they want to get people back training by the second week in May, and I can understand it's an awkward position if you're a player, because, you know, very much the feeling around the world at the moment is, as much as we love sport, it's not the most important thing at the moment. And if you're a player, I'm sure that's exactly how most of them are feeling. Some might feel, do you know what, maybe people need a bit of joy in their life, maybe watching a bit of sport would do that as well. But they can't take any risks. If it is safe to do so, if they want to isolate all the teams and the squads and they can carry it out safely, then it becomes a more realistic proposition. But if they take risks, then, you know, it just seems like it's all wrong.
Is there a possibility, though, as well, Phil, and this will probably feed into our conversation around the League of Ireland from this week as well, that possibly we are kind of assuming that people would look for the release of watching sport on TV. There is the possibility that people just wouldn't want to watch it. You know, maybe there's not an appetite out there to actually watch sport, because as you said, people might think this has been rushed back. I'm not particularly interested in sport at the moment because things are as bleak as they are in terms of real world news as well. There's a possibility that, you know, sport could return, but maybe these kind of big TV or streaming figures that people are expecting might not come to pass.
Yeah, no, of course there's a possibility, but I think one thing we've seen in the past with football, that regardless of what happens, things can resume pretty quickly, and it can just become, I mean, I'm going to use the word business as usual, where people forget pretty quickly, and they just, like, within a few minutes, they're screaming at their TV, wanting their team to score a goal. It sounds bizarre given what's happened over the last few months, but it's hard to know how that would happen. And I know in the UK, the government are maybe talking about how if the Premier League does come back, games should be free to air, because not everyone can afford subscriptions, especially given how many people are out of work now, that if you are going to resume a league, that it's only right that everyone who has to stay in and isolate could actually see the games.
And that brings us around nicely to the League of Ireland then, because obviously quite a few decisions will have to be made in terms of what's going to happen with the season. We were talking to Carl Shepherd on Off the Ball on Wednesday, and he was saying certainly the players are hoping that maybe some kind of deal could be done to stream games to try and keep some kind of revenue and interest in the league coming in, particularly if they have to go behind closed doors. It definitely seems the FAI are now seriously considering that as an option with the talks they had with the clubs earlier this week as well. Is there a possibility in your mind that we get to June, and if everything is deemed that it would be safe to do so, with maybe very restricted crowds or behind closed doors, that the League of Ireland season can get back underway again?
Well, it's a tough one to know, because obviously we had the announcement in the last couple of days that any sport or event that has over 5,000 people isn't going to go ahead until after August. So obviously that's not an issue for League of Ireland, because many of the grounds don't have that capacity. But is there a difference between having 5,000 people spread out in Croke Park compared to having 300, 400 people packed into a small confined space in a League of Ireland stadium? So there are a lot of variables to be considered when it comes to this. And the League of Ireland as a whole, most of them rely on, apart from the likes of Dundalk, who have been in Europe the last couple of years, most of them rely on ticket sales. And if the players if the games go ahead behind closed doors, then they're going to have to come up with some sort of system whereby people can pay into these games, pay to see, whether it's €5, whether it's €10 to watch these games. It can't be free to err in the League of Ireland because the players need to get paid, and the players don't get paid unless the clubs have income, and without fans, the League of Ireland clubs don't have income. So it's a really difficult position the League of Ireland's in at the minute. I would be leaning on towards the fact that the League of Ireland's just not going to go ahead this season. I think the likes of certain players in the league have been suggesting the same as well. So if that's the safest option, then it probably is the best option. If teams and clubs around Ireland can survive without a season this year, knowing that it's going to come back in full force next year, that might be the most financially secure option as well.
Yeah, Phil, that is a consideration. I mean, I think understandably, clubs have had to put their staff on the job retention scheme. In some cases, players have been temporarily let go by the clubs as well. I think when you hear announcements like we had early this week about the 5,000 people limit in terms of, licenses wouldn't be granted for events above that, there will definitely be, I think, a safety first feeling out there as well, that if, events of more than 5,000 aren't allowed, it could be very difficult for events under 5,000. There's no guarantee just because 1,000 people will be going to an event that people would actually try and force that through.
Yeah, you also have to take into account what ground or what facilities certain clubs have. And obviously one of the things we've noticed in the last few months is sanitising, that where you go into places, supermarkets, they have all the facilities there for you to sanitise your hands before and after. And things like that have to be done around grounds, toilet facilities, catering. Obviously, 5,000, there's not many attendances that will be above 5,000. You think back to the record attendance between Shamrock Rovers and Bohemians, or the Shamrock Rovers and Dundalk game as well. So that's one of the rare occasions where it is over 5,000, but under 5,000 doesn't necessarily mean it can go ahead, because you could still be crammed into grounds, and that's the issue. So Niall Quinn has talked about how FIFA might be able to help them out. Obviously UEFA as well. UEFA met this week. Hopefully they can we'll kind of need the Champions League and Europa League to finish for some of the League of Ireland clubs to get money off them as well. But it's all up in the air. I don't like to speculate because we don't know, but the worry is that if there was no season, how many clubs could survive?
Yeah, no, it's a serious concern. Gentlemen, it's been great to catch up with you on this Friday, this very formal Friday. It's been nice to dress up alongside you for a while. I don't know how long it's going to be, Phil, before you change back in. Are you going to stay in the suit for the day?
To be honest with you, the top button is already getting a bit stuffy. I'm thinking, when do you put your tie around your head? Like if you're treating it like a wedding, when do you take the jacket off? I've got the waistcoat as well,
What you really need to do is just ruffle the tie and bring it down as a message to your players that the game's just not going well enough.
Business is on, gentlemen. Business is on. That has been Phil Egan, and that's been Enda Coll. Thanks a million for joining us. Don't forget, if you want to take part in Formal Friday, check out offtheball.com, and you can see the GoFundMe link there as we support frontline workers across the health service here in Ireland as well. And we will chat to you next Friday on the Paddy Power Half Hour.
The Paddy Power Half Hour on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power, the greatest football partnership since Jeff and Heskey.